You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. Hey, welcome into today's episode. My guest today is Chad Weiberg, who is the athletic director at Oklahoma State University. Chad, I really appreciate you taking the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule right now in this time of the year and spending a few minutes with us today.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be with you.
Always, always. So I told you I had two or three themes that I wanted us to talk about, and I think I'll start with family first. You have been around college athletics all your life, and your dad's been an assistant basketball coach, and you have brothers involved in basketball. You have had a full career of college experience. Your uncle was the commissioner of the BIG12, Kevin Weiberg. Tell me, I know the basketball experience of the other members of your family, but yet you end up on the administrative side. At what point in your career path did you sort of say, okay, this is where I believe I'm gifted and what I want to pursue?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I tell the story all the time. I was born in February, so that's basketball season, right? So I think I attended my first sporting event when I was something like 2 days old, maybe 3 days old, and so literally have been around it my entire life, and just really, I think the older I got, the more interested I got in it. Obviously, my dad was a basketball coach, and so that was, something that I think any young kid, starts thinking about is, do I want to do what my dad does? And but as you pointed out, I also had an uncle, or have an uncle, that is in athletics administration, and so I was aware of that path also. And so I don't know what the moment in time, or if there was a moment in time that I started gravitating towards more the administrative path. I think part of it is my dad was a great basketball coach and passionate about what he did and all of those things. But he would say from time to time to us, I'm sure it was probably after one of those frustrating games or frustrating seasons, is don't be a coach. And I think really what he meant by that was, I think he probably preferred us to go out and, be some other profession, doctor, lawyer, something like that. But so I saw what that was, and wasn't sure that was going to be, probably the best path for me. And, but I knew I loved athletics. I loved being around it. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't the most talented, gifted player. And so I knew that was going to quickly come to an end. And if I was going to be around college athletics, I'd have to find a different path to do that. And so, through a number of circumstances and a lot of people that I've been fortunate to be around, I ended up with an internship, an unpaid internship here in the OSU athletic department my junior year in college. And that really is what gave me the real opportunity to see what being in and around athletic administration was all about. And I think that's when I knew that was the path that was the right path for me to go down.
Well, I'm just curious, with that internship, what facet of the department? Was it in development? Because you had a long career in development.
It was in development, and that's exactly right. So I started out in our what we call the posse. So our posse club is the fundraising arm of OSU athletics, and that is where I started.
Yeah. So I'm interested. I know you were there for a time before you actually left and went to K-State. And I think back on like my career, I was an intern and grad assistant at Clemson, and my alma mater, loved it, whatever. But at some point you decide you have to pivot to the possibility and the risk taking of stepping outside of your known universe and maybe going somewhere else to expand your horizons and seek an opportunity, take advantage of an opportunity. And there's probably always in the back of our minds the possibility of coming back to places we love, our alma maters or whatever. So I can't remember how long you were at in Stillwater in employed wise before you went to Manhattan, but I know that was a big decision for you, according to the different articles I've read about your career path and that kind of thing. Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So I was here a total of 9 years after I graduated, and that, in and of itself is, just by pure happenstance and just being in the right place really at the right time. Like I said, did an unpaid internship my junior year here, and then, as I was getting ready to leave for the summer between my junior and senior year, they asked if I would want to come back my senior year and be an intern again, and they said that if I was, they would be willing to pay me, that year. And I thought that was the best thing ever, right? I thought I just totally made it at that point. And so absolutely, I'll be back my senior year. And then I just was fortunate as I was graduating, and I actually started the job search, right? I was just looking at how do I get my foot in the door, and I was applying at big schools all over the country, small schools all over the country, just anywhere that I could go to get my foot in the door. And it just happened to be that one of the people that I interned with here in the Posse athletic office went into private business kind of unexpectedly and opened a position. He was a little bit older. I thought he was older, right? Looking back on it, he was probably maybe 8 years older than I was or something like that. So it was in no way old, but I certainly didn't look at him as any kind of entry level position or that position. So I thought they would be looking for something, someone with a lot more experience than I had. And so I had not applied for that position here. And I almost literally, rounding a corner, almost bumped into Dave Martin one day here in the athletic department. Dave at the time was the acting, what we would call deputy athletic director now. I'm not sure that was the title that he had at the time, but he certainly played that role. And I'll never forget, he asked, Weiberg, are you going to apply for that job or what? Well, I knew that the answer that he wanted is for me to say, yes, I was, even though I wasn't really planning on doing it because I didn't think I had any shot at it. And so I did and ended up getting the job. And I was in the athletic department for 4 years. And then I was approached about the opportunity to move over to the OSU Alumni Association, handling all their field operations, working with their chapters, being the athletics liaison. I'd worked with them closely, in my role in athletics. And my initial reaction to it, in fact, the way they approached me was pretty good. They, asked if I knew anybody that would be interested in the job. And I said, well, I might have a couple friends that might. Let me ask them. They said, great. Just know that if we can find the right person, this is what we would be willing to pay them. Well, as I recall, it was like twice what I was making in the athletic department. And so I quickly said, well, okay, let's back this conversation up a little bit. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. And it was a good opportunity, obviously, from a pay standpoint for sure. But it scared me, right? It scared me to think about getting out of athletics because I thought that was always my dream. And one of the questions that I had, and I asked some of my mentors about, including my uncle, was, if I did this and decided that I wanted to get back into athletics, was that closing any doors for me? And he and others said that they did not think that it was in any way, and in fact could be good. And it certainly was. I mean, I learned a lot by making that move. And part of that, Mike, is I think we in athletics certainly at the time, and I think somewhat now, are guilty of it. Is we focus so much on that 100-mile radius or maybe even 150-mile radius around the school, right? Because those are the people we think of when we think coming back to games and need season tickets and need parking and all of those things. And what working for the Alumni Association, provided for me was just the perspective change. I was working with alumni in Seattle, Washington, or Orlando, Florida, or Washington, D.C., or Los Angeles, California, and I learned very quickly that those people were no less passionate about Oklahoma State than the people that were in Oklahoma City or Tulsa or Stillwater. They just were geographically challenged. Right? They could not physically get back to games every weekend, and so season tickets might not have made sense for them, or parking might not have made sense for them, but they were no less passionate. And, so you start to realize that, you got to just change the way you approach those people and the things that you talk about with those people, but the passion is there. And so learned a lot by doing that. And I was there, I think, about 3 years. And then I was approached by the OSU Foundation about becoming a development officer for the College of Business, which was my college. So it made a lot of sense in a lot of ways. And I knew that would give me the opportunity to first get into major gift fundraising. And so I took that opportunity, and it was great for all of those same reasons. Of course, a lot of the people that I'd met in my time, both at athletics and the Alumni Association, were College of Business alumni. And so, it made sense. And I did learn a lot about that, about the major gift fundraising side, and was there for just a little over a year when OkSt started the fundraising process for what we now know as Boone Pickens Stadium, but it was before Boone had even gotten involved. And so the foundation actually, I was still a foundation employee, but they took me out of the College of Business and put me back in athletic fundraising to help with the football stadium. So at that point, it kind of come full circle. But in that time, I met my now wife, and she was at K-State, and it was in the Alumni Association at K-State. And long story short, after spending some time as friends, we kind of started doing the long distance dating thing, then got engaged, and obviously at that point had to figure out how to get in the same town. And of course, I really thought that she was going to end up in Stillwater, but I said, well, why don't we both look in both places, and we'll go whichever one makes the most sense. She loved her job. I got that. And I'd spent, obviously a lot of time in Manhattan and got to know people there in the process. But, and I think we both ended up with job offers in both places. And then we had to figure out what was the best, kind of combination. And you're right, Mike, I think by that time, I kind of did have the sense that it would probably be good for me to leave and go experience something completely different, and learn how different places do different things, and so I kind of felt like, and probably partly to prove to myself that I could do it somewhere else too. I think was part of it. Again, scared me. I thought, okay, I'm here at my alma mater. I think a lot of people spend their whole careers trying to figure out how to get back to their alma mater. And here I was there thinking about leaving, right? And so it was certainly scary. And I can vividly remember knowing that if I was going to make that decision, I had to make it, had to get right in my mind that the chances of me ever getting back to Stillwater were very, very slim. And if I couldn't get my mind in that place, then I knew that I might as well not leave. That was probably the indication that I needed to stay. Because if the whole reason I was leaving was to try to get back, then I'm probably not going to be doing the job as well as I could do, or doing, being as good of an employee as I could be for the place that I'm at. And so I got there, I think, and still hopeful that might work out someday, but just knowing that chances were slim, stars would have to align, and so made the move to Manhattan. Actually was at their foundation to begin with. I was the director of corporate and foundation relations for K-State when I first went there. And again, that turned out to be a great position for me, because in that role, I got to work with every development officer on campus. I got to work with every dean on campus, a lot of the department heads on campus. I think my primary campus report was to the provost. So it was a great kind of immersion 101 into everything Kansas State. Just met so many people and got to understand the institution really, really well. Of course, K-State and Oklahoma State are very, very similar, so a lot of it seemed very natural to me anyway, but I just don't think there could have been a better position to sort of get ingrained in an understanding of the institution than that position was. But after I think being there for just a little over a year, there was, Shane Zinger left the athletic department to take his first AD job at Illinois State and opened the position. They moved Kurt McGuffin into that position, but opened up then Kurt's role. And I got a call from Tim Weiser, who was the AD at the time, and said, "Hey, what are your thoughts about coming back into athletics?" And so thought about it and ended up doing it, and then was there for 10 years in development at K-State. Ended up having 3 different athletic directors and a bunch of different roles in that time as people move on and take other opportunities and opportunities present themselves. But had a great run there and have built so many great relationships and friendships. And both of our kids were born in Manhattan, and was just turned out to be, fortunately for me, absolutely the right decision to make in that regard.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I want to stop right there for just a minute. I want to go back and visit some of the development career that you've had and ask some granular questions for the benefit of somebody who might be listening to this, and then we'll kind of continue on the path that ultimately led you back to Oklahoma State. First thing, I think it's really interesting that you spent some time in the alumni office and the university development arena, foundation, et cetera. And, as you know, many times on a campus, there's a lack of partnership between those two entities, the athletic department and the university development office, lack of partnership and advancement causes many times. And some of it is just purely you're not communicating appropriately, right? Or you don't know each other well, and you don't understand that you have much more in common in terms of your shared values and your goals than you perhaps realize. So having now sat on both sides of that equation, what advice would you give someone who's sitting here today that's maybe a member of NAD and they're in development somewhere in America and they're listening to this podcast? How do you make sure that you create that bridge of trust so that you, at the end of the day, really, as you know, Chad, you actually can, rising tide lifts all boats, you can actually probably accomplish more if you have the right relationship between those two situations.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think what I learned, having been in all of those places, is a lot of it comes, some of the issues I think are created from just a misunderstanding, right? I think they're just as a misunderstanding of the different challenges and roles and those sorts of things. And so I think as often so much of it does, it comes down to effectively communicating and often, just having open lines of communication and an understanding about, how it does all fit together, because it does. I mean, at the end of the day, I think all of our alumni, they aren't out there looking at us like OSU Athletics, OSU Alumni Association, OSU Foundation. They don't understand really they just look at us as Oklahoma State University, right, for the most part. And at least that's the way they want to. And you'll actually hear some of them that get into more leadership roles sometimes and start to understand the kind of all the dynamics and politics and differences. And you'll hear them, kind of say sometimes, "I wish I didn't know that. I wish I could go back to, what I thought before." And I think that's on us, right? We shouldn't make them have to think that way or feel that way. And so I think it is just an understanding that we're all trying to go in the same direction, trying to get to the same place, and we're going to get there a lot more effectively, a lot more efficiently for everyone involved is if we're working together. And we can do that. We all have obviously unique and certain roles to play in that, but if we're all effective in that and we're all achieving at the level that we want to achieve at, then it's going to help everyone when we get there. It's often said the rising tide lifts all boats, but I think that is certainly true for the institution and all those entities involved. And so I think it is just a coordinated and communication. If you're doing that effectively, then I think that's what helps as much as anything, and just an understanding. And that understanding is through having those relationships and those communications. But if you can, if the structure is there where you can do that, then I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. So you have a national reputation as a really gifted fundraiser, and you won 2014 Fundraiser of the Year nationally, right? And but the one thing that comes across thematically, at least outside looking in, as you ask about Chad Weiberg or read about Chad Weiberg, is Chad is excellent at relationship building. And even like last night, I was talking to John Curry, our good friend, about your time at K-State with him, and he said, you know, what really stood out to him is when he got there, you know, he felt like he needed to help pour fuel on the fire in terms of objectives, and he's has, you know, had a development focus before he became an AD, et cetera. But he said the thing that made it all work at the end of the day was the relationships that Chad Weiberg had. So that we had his giftedness in relationship building, and we came in with a plan specific to how we could move the athletic department forward, and we were able to take advantage of those years of building relationships that Chad had gone about. So as you know, it's the right project, it's the right thing at the right time for the right amount from the right person. And so tell me a little bit about how you viewed this notion of relationship building and what you learned through the years as you did that to a significant level of success ultimately.
Well, first of all, it's very nice for John to say those things. And, you know, I heard about you long before I knew you through John as well, and all the great things that he said about you and the things he learned from you. So it's amazing how that all that works, right? So, and I certainly learned a lot from John, and so I'm sure there's parts of things that I learned from John that he learned from you. So here we are, right? So pretty cool how that kind of stuff works. But you know, and you're exactly right. I mean, I think that the pouring the fuel on the fire is a great way to put it. I mean, John came in and was great at you know, developing the plan and all of the vision really that our donors could buy into, right? They could see what that was going to do for K-State athletics, and so it was pretty. Honestly, I feel like it was not easy. I shouldn't say that, but you know, it just was fun, right? I mean, it was great to be able to go out and sell that vision, and and it takes all of that. And John was certainly understanding. He understood development. He understood the role. He was great about giving us the resources to be able to do what it was that we needed to do, and fortunately, we were able to show the results and prove the model. You know, a big part of our job, especially with somebody like John, was to set John up, right? I mean, he was a pretty good closer too, so, and a good relationship builder himself. And so, you know, I think knowing that was there also was very helpful to us in accomplishing what we accomplished. So, but, you know, I think that, I don't know, Mike, I think to answer your question, you know, I think it's just that really, you know, I think just treat people how, you know, I would want to be treated, number one. But then I think part of it, number two, is never losing sight of, you know, of your role and what you're there to do. And yes, you build relationships, and certainly some of those relationships turn into friendships, right? And I was just with a K-State donor last weekend, you know, that obviously now it's not a donor, you know, kind of relationships, just a friendship, right?
Yeah.
And you certainly develop those friendships. But even then, at the end of the day, you've got to remember why it is that you're there and the role that you're in. And they are the donor, you are the fundraiser, and you know, they love their institution, and they want their institution to be successful. And a part of their institution being successful is having people there that are doing their job effectively, right? And so I always, you know, it was always important for me to make sure that I was trying to do the best I could do at my job on behalf of them for their institution, right? And just my role happened to be trying to raise money and asking them for money, right? And I felt like if I'm not asking them for money at some point they're not going to be very happy. As much as they might like me, they're not going to be very happy with me, because that's my role. I'm there to do that. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job on behalf of their institution and that they love, right? And so I just always try to keep that in mind, and you know, and at the same, and part of that is, you know, there's always times in our jobs and at our institutions that sometimes things aren't going well, right? You hit rocky patches or whatever, and so you've got to balance. I think in any kind of external role like that, you have to balance the need to be real and honest, while at the same time remembering that you are a representative of that institution, right?
Yeah.
And there are, you know, you've got to put them in the best possible light that you can put them in. So there's a balance there sometimes. And but I'll tell you this, you know, we went before John got there. There were some circumstances that happened that, you know, kind of, we went through a rocky time, some coaching turnover and things like that. And looking back on it, I can tell you that it was during those times that I built the deepest and best relationships, right? Yeah. And it wasn't, you know, you know, you don't go into hiding. You don't go, that's the most important time to be out with the donors, is when they're not particularly happy about what's going on, when they're not particularly feeling comfortable or whatever, have a lot of questions. You know, you need to be out with them and answering those questions. And then I think saw the you know, the benefits of that, the fruits of that, or whatever you want to call it, when things started turning around. John came in, the leadership got better, you know, everything stabilized, we started having success. Then it just made the conversations about where we were going with those donors so much easier at that point. You know, the groundwork sort of had been laid, the trust, the relationship, all of those things. And so, you know, you never want to go through the kind of rough patches, but you know, when you do, there's opportunity there too.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm going to leave this. We're going to move to through the Texas Tech years on to becoming the AD at Oklahoma State. But I'm going to leave a teaser that folks can ask you about next time they see you in the hallway of an industry event. And John shared with me to ask you at some point, and you and I can talk offline, about how a 2-week tour of World War II battlefields led to the largest gift in the history of K-State. So we won't talk about that right now, but we'll catch up on that one offline. I know there's a great story on that one, and that really shows, you know, look, you've got to meet people where they are and figure out how do you connect. So look, you left K-State, you went to Texas Tech, worked with Kirby, great success there as well. But I want to move on to your time of coming back to Oklahoma State, and basically, at least in the public eye, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. It was pretty much, hey, that's Chad's job. He's being brought back there with the thought that he's the next AD. Whether or not that was formalized, that's your story to tell. But you know, and then you get the chance. You get the chance to actually become the guy at your alma mater, even though that risk was there a number of years before as to whether or not that would ever end up being a result. And you probably know you are more of an outlier than you are the norm in that equation. But here you are today. And when I think about Oklahoma State athletics over the last, you know, let's call it 20 years or so, and you've been around it a lot of those years, two names come to mind immediately that I'd love for you just to park on for just a minute to tell anything about their influence on your life and who you are becoming as an athletic director. And obviously that's Mike Holder and T. Boone Pickens. You know, just talk for a minute about their impact on Oklahoma State and maybe how they're informing how you're trying to lead today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, it's almost hard to really put into words and do justice, you know, to that. And they, you know, first of all, you know, obviously Coach Holder is the whole reason that I did get to come back. You know, I talk about the stars aligning, and well, he was a big part of, you know, of those stars aligning. And you know, when he first, you know, introduced the idea of that happening, you know, I almost couldn't believe it. I was just like, what is he, what's he talking about here? But so I owe so much to him, and even having the opportunity, but then just the things that I learned, from being able to be here and observe him and watch him, also a big part of it. I actually did not get to know Boone all that well. Unfortunately, by the time I got back here, he was already having some of his health problems, and so was around him, some when I got back, but certainly not, what you would call the, sort of the heyday and the big personality that was Boone and all of those things. But the legacy that he has left here, and certainly, through Coach Holder, you feel like that him, and because so much of what really they accomplished together here is, you see it everywhere. You can't get away from it. Not that you would want to, but it just is everywhere, and not just in the facilities and the structure and all of that, but also just in the mindset and the he inspired just so many people, other donors and things like that to do, and you hear it all the time. When our conversations with donors that have made big, significant contributions themselves, they'll tell the story about the inspiration that Boone provided for them to do what they did. And had he not done what he did, there's no way they would have probably even thought about doing what they did. And so, and I think Coach Holder is certainly one of the best fundraisers I've probably ever been around. And he is relentless in a good way, I think. He develops a vision, and it certainly is a vision. It's a lot of times it's so big and bold that people, probably initially think that he's crazy, right? And it's usually things that are just going to take a lot of time and a lot of work. We certainly could have done some of these things around here a lot quicker and probably a lot easier, but we would have ended up with something less. And he wasn't willing to compromise on the something less. If we were going to do it, it was going to be among the best in the country, if not the best in the country. And we were going to take the time, whatever that time was, to get it done. And a lot of times it did take time, but it got done. And when it was done, it was spectacular. And I think that is a powerful, message when you're having conversations with donors, right? You're asking them to make big investments. And I think a lot of people who have been successful enough to be able to make those kinds of investments, they're visionaries also, right? There's a reason they've been that successful. And what resonates with them is the opportunity to, invest in something, or make a difference in something that is going to be a difference maker or a game changer, right? To see that kind of actual vision out there is going to be a motivation for them. And I think that's what Coach Holder understood so well, and was able to communicate and build those relationships and get that kind of buy-in for that kind of vision. And so just to, again, have another person like that to learn from, is just I'm very fortunate for that.
Yeah. Hey, so these are changing times. A lot going on in the marketplaces. We could talk for hours and hours about. But one thing in particular I want to talk with you about here briefly is I know your new commissioner, Brett Yormark, was just on your campus within the last few days. Curious to your thoughts on his vision, his energy, and first impressions from your time with him.
Yeah. Yes. We had a great visit here. And been around him some now. He hasn't been on the job officially very long, but he's been working the job a lot longer than that, I think. And I think he is doing a great job. You're absolutely right. He brings a very energetic guy, a lot of positive energy, and is likable, listens, I think, really well, is learning the conference and the membership, obviously, and and then all the just the dynamics in college athletics. But also think he brings a lot of really, really good experience to the position from his media background and some of the connections that he has there, and just the understanding of that. And then I think he's going to bring a lot of really, really creative and innovative and new ideas to the conference as well, given his background and his experience and his perspective that, quite frankly, I don't think we've thought that way. And so I think it's exciting that we're going to start thinking that way. We're going to be exploring all those possibilities, and we're going to be innovative. And so I think that is really, really exciting for the Big 12 conference.
That's great. So last question. Obviously, Oklahoma will soon depart for the Southeastern Conference, and there's a lot of speculation over time as to whether or not different games and series will continue. The Bedlam series is very important to folks who live in the state of Oklahoma, and I know you and Joe have probably had multiple conversations about this. What do you foresee there in terms of competition in the long run?
Well, that is, as you can imagine, a question that I get a lot. And the problem with answering the question, right, is it's a lot more complicated and a lot more nuanced than you can put in a soundbite. All right. And part of it is every sport is different, number one. And so most often, right, when you get asked the question, are we going to play Bedlam again? Sometimes my response is, are you talking about football or are you talking about Bedlam? And there's always a pause. Oh, no, I'm just talking about football. And I get that, right? But every sport is different. And so I think the answer, quite honestly, could be different for every sport and what that looks like moving forward. As you know, as everyone listening knows, that, scheduling for all of those other sports is a little bit different than scheduling for football, right? They happen more on an annual basis or, maybe 2 years out. So there's, I think, a lot more flexibility and possibility there. As it relates to football and Bedlam, I think that what Joe and I have talked about is there's just logistics to be worked out. I mean, I think for the most part, we're scheduled out in our Power 5 non-conference schedule through 2038. And I think they're similar. In fact, I think if you compare the two schedules, there's maybe 1 year between now and 2038 that we both don't have a Power 5 currently scheduled in the non-conference schedule. And so, just logistically to work out when we would play in that scenario is complicated, right? There's a lot of dominoes that would have to fall to make those things possible. And I'm not saying that those dominoes won't fall. It's possible that they will. And so, it could be that we end up playing Bedlam earlier than that 2038 time. But it seems possible, too, that there's at least going to be a pause in it, and how long that pause is, we'll see. It's unknown. But, we've got a great non-conference schedule coming up. I mean, we've got, and some of it with SEC opponents, ironically, right? We've got Arkansas on our schedule 4 years, twice here in Stillwater, twice in Fayetteville coming up. We've got Alabama on our schedule coming up, once here in Stillwater, once in Tuscaloosa. So, where it's not, so we would play, I believe we would play Bedlam if if it's the right thing to do and the opportunity presents itself. But at the same time, it's I think our fans are excited about having the Razorbacks come into Stillwater and having the Crimson Tide come into Stillwater as well. And so we're just going to have to work through those things.
That's great. I expected your answer, to be clear. I know in particular football is a very difficult proposition, and I mainly was referring to other sports, and you've answered that very, very well in this regard. And you're right. I mean, you've got and let's be candid. I mean, down the road here, conference schedules might change in terms of the number of conference games in respective conferences too, and that adds another wrinkle to the whole deal. So, man, this has been great conversation, Chad. I just want to tell you I appreciate you so much taking the time. I've got a lot more notes here we could have talked about, and maybe we'll do that offline at some point. And just want to wish you and Oklahoma State all the best here as you enter the new seasons and this now 22-23 school year, and appreciate the time you've given me today.
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it so much. Always enjoy listening, and so fun to be part of it.
All right, folks. This has been Chad Weiberg, the Director of Athletics at Oklahoma State University. I'm Mike Hamilton, your host for From the Chair. Reminder, you can see this in video format on YouTube and across all audio platforms. You can listen to it. Each Wednesday, we're publishing these podcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.